I'm not giving a Devar Torah this morning. I did hear someone go, woohoo, from this direction. I'm giving a Devar Haftorah. Do people remember where we are in the Jewish calendar? What? Close to Tisha B'Av, right? So it's interesting, because it's like circles with circles, wheels within wheels. One of the ways, there are many ways to sort of understand where we are in the Jewish year. And this is, I think, what happens when you are a people with a religion as old as we are. After 3,000 years, things build up. So there's the natural cycle of the year. It's true. That's why every Jewish holiday has 6 different meanings, because people got bored, so they added another meaning. So it's true. So, there's the natural cycle of the year, and then there's the Torah cycle of the year, and then there's the Jewish holiday cycle of the year, and then there's the Jewish history cycle of the year. You know what I'm saying? Right? And all of those sort of like swirl around each other. And what's complicated about this part of the summer is it's actually a very difficult part of the Jewish history part of the year, because we're about 3 weeks away from Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av, when both temples were destroyed in Jerusalem. Just so you know, by the way these things work is that there's 2 descriptions of when the temple was destroyed in Jerusalem. One says it was on the 8th of Av, the other says it was the 10th of Av, and so therefore we've decided it was on the 9th. It's a good compromise, that's what we do. What happens though is that the Haftorahs change at this time of year. Most of the Haftorahs of the year are connected to one line or one thought in the Torah portion. So, on the Haftorah that deals with the starting of the Mishkan, it's the section from the book of Kings when the King Solomon opens the temple for the first time. And there's this really beautiful story. There's always an associative element. But here what we do is we depart from where we are in the cycle of reading Torah to talk about the cycle of Jewish history. And there are 3 Haftorahs, they're called Tochecha, which is politely translated as admonition. But Tochecha means criticism. So 3 critical Haftorahs that are followed by 4, if I remember correctly, 5. Is it 5? 7? Look, we all know my issues with numbers. We're going to get it. 7 Haftorahs of consolation, of Nechemta, that come after Tisha B'Av. And by the way, it's very important to know, and also very much in the Jewish personality, that you always need more consolation than you do criticism. So that's how we do things. But we're actually at the first of them, and what's amazing about this particular one is it's not critical, or at least not yet. This is the beginning of the book of Jeremiah. So if you turn to page 1278, I don't know why in this Chumash, for those who have eyes to see, that this is called the Haftorah for Matot, because everybody else thinks this is the Haftorah for Pinchas. I don't know if they put it this way because they wanted it to differentiate the leap year stuff for those who think. But this is the very first verses this is the opening of the book of Jeremiah. Jeremiah was an interesting and controversial figure. Whereas Isaiah is known as the prophet of consolation, Jeremiah is known as the prophet of? Did someone say doom? They're all kind of prophets of doom. Like, what do you want? But he's known as the most critical of the prophets, even though, by the way, as he's being led into exile, after having warned the people, don't ally yourself with Egypt, otherwise you're going to go into exile. He's being led into exile. What's his last action as he's leaving the land of Israel? He buys a plot of land in Israel for when he returns. As he's being led away. Amazing. I happen to love these particular verses at the beginning of Haftorah Matot, and I thought maybe we would read them together. Let's skip the historical ones and start on Pasuk 4, verse 4. one of the things I'd ask you to do is, you can translate this actually into the song of the Haftorah in your head. And the word, na na na, na 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 na, and the word of the Lord came to me and said, before I created you in the womb, it says, I selected you, but the Hebrew is Yidaticha, which means I knew you.
Yeah, it also has a sexual meaning, but not here.
Not here. So thank you. That would be theologically complicated beyond my abilities to reconcile. Before you were formed in the womb, I knew you. And before you came out of the uterus, I made you holy. I appointed you a prophet to the nations. I gave you as a prophet to the nations. And Jeremiah responds, Ehe Adoni Adonai, my Lord Adonai, I don't actually know how to speak. Ki na'ar nochi, I'm just a lad, a youth. What's narishkeit? I'm a foolish young man, a sophomore. And God said to him, don't say, Al tomar na'ar nochi. Ki al kol asher ashlachacha telech. But go wherever I send you. Vet kol asher atzavecha tedaber. And whatever I command you, that's what you should speak. Al tira mipnehem. Don't be afraid of them. Kidcha anochi ani. Because I am with you. Latzilcha ne'um Hashem. To save you, says God. And this is the sort of birth story of the prophet Jeremiah. The question, I think, is what is going on here and sort of why does this matter to us? But first, I just want to, if you don't mind me the aside, to draw your attention, if I can, Rabbi's privilege, to just the beauty of this sentiment. Before you were formed in the womb, I knew you. And before you came from your mother's belly, right, I had already declared you holy. And so one of the things I just want to bring your eyes to is the poetry of all this. This verse, by the way, is wrongly used in evangelical context to speak against abortion. I'm sure that's on some people's minds here. That's not what it means at all. God is speaking to Jeremiah personally, as a unique individual, as a different individual, to say, I brought you into this world to be a prophet. I think of this verse sometimes. I think of this verse when I'm thinking about how to know what the right thing is to do, which these days is something that haunts me quite a bit. It stalks my nights and sometimes my days too, and yours as well, because you do me the privilege of speaking to me and you tell me how unsure you feel, how difficult it is to sit in a sanctuary sometime with what's going on in the world. I won't presume your viewpoints because I've heard them, and the truth is what's important about this community is actually the community has multiple viewpoints. And the reason I think the community has multiple viewpoints, and I'll say this again and again, is because we as a Jewish people have experienced a shattering. Either since October 7th or before October 7th or because of the anti-Semitism in the world, both because of what Israel's doing or because of what's being done to Israel, because of both what this country is doing or what's being done in this country. And so I want you to imagine for a second a pane of glass to which someone took a hammer and didn't, by the way, break it apart entirely. But I want you to see all the shards, all the veins of break that are in that glass. And then you'll understand why we all disagree with each other, even though we're all connected to each other. Because that's what this moment in history does to us, right? It separates us, and each of us carries a sliver of the truth, a sliver of the principles that are right and good, and yet we are separated, we are broken from one another, and we can't necessarily understand how someone who's on the other side, who's holding a different shard, who's on the other side of the shattering, could be different, could hold an opinion different than us. And thus what we feel often is, forgive me for speaking in your voice, but this is what you say to me. What do people feel? What would you say? Pain? Fear? You know what I hear mostly? Loneliness. Do you feel alone in this space? How can others be silent when you want to scream from the rooftops? This is what I hear. This, of course, affects me too. There's no proof somehow that keeps a rabbi from experiencing moments of soul-wrenching doubt. There's no kind of buffer that can keep a human being from being torn apart when it's time to be torn apart. And of course, the difficulty of what it means to be human is when you're being torn apart, what do you have to do? Keep it together. Right? That's the difficulty of the moment, is actually the world needs us desperately in this time and in this place. It needs our voices and it needs our insight. It largely doesn't need our unbelievable rage, but it does need a salve to that rage. And yet it needs our strength, and somehow it does need the rage. It's very confusing to know what to do. It needs our anger, and our anger is poisonous. It needs our compassion, and our compassion is not enough. It needs our openness, but sometimes we need to be forceful, and it needs our force, but it also demands that we be open. It's nearly impossible. And so the question for me is, what do you do as a human being when you feel this way? When all you want to do is sort of curl into a ball, and yet there is the necessity to speak and to be courageous and to fix the world, because this is a moment in which courage is required, demanded, non-optional. We could run, and it would not work. You understand what I'm saying? Do you believe what I'm saying? It's moments like these that I turn to the words of the prophets. And I turn to them for comfort. And I'm going to give you two ways to understand them. One is the Rabbi Scott way, which means God. And the other, and the other way, I think, is either more biological or more psychological, which is to say that, the rational part of your brain is only a part of your brain. We tend to think that our thinking brain is actually the entirety of who we are, as opposed to probably the minority of what we are. Those who are scientists in the room, and especially those who are physicians or involved in the health scientists and who know physiology, actually know that a significant part of what we are is made up not by our conscious thoughts, not by where logic leads us, or where empathy dictates that we should go, by a whole part of our brain that lies under the surface. The middle of our brain, the hindbrain, the brainstem, it's only really the front of our brain that is thinking for us. And what was that great Buddhist metaphor for what our mind really is? A person riding a... No, you don't. There's a bunch of Bujus in this community, right? It's right. This was really one of the things that Buddhist meditation has really given us is an image of the mind, an understanding of what our minds is, and that's why it's helpful. So what they say is that our minds are like a person riding an elephant. You may have the reins, but the elephant goes where it wants to go. Right? So that's the second way to think of this. And what I'm trying to say is there is something in your lives, in our life, in my life, in your way of thinking that is much bigger than you. And really, at the end of the day, when you are up in the sleepless nights trying to figure out, am I right? Am I fighting for what's right? Have I been misled, as this person over here on this side of the debate tells me? Have I been lied to, or am I doing wrong, as this person over on this side of the debate tells me? When you're caught betwixt and between in this way, how do I know what's right to do? For me, what I try to remember is that there is a Holy One who knew me before I was ever born, before that I was a twinkle in my parents' eyes. And upon that Holy One do I rely. And that is the one who I serve. And that leads me not to heights of arrogance, but into humility. Both the resolve to do what's right and the openness to admit that I might not be right. And for those of you who feel such passion and anger when you see people who you have identified as hurting the community, what are the words that I've heard? Cancer, disease, plague. What's amazing to me is that given the sort of breadth of diversity of opinions that we have, everybody in this room would fall into one of those categories, according to somebody else. When you are identified in that way, what should you do? I want you to remember that there is a part of you that is much, much bigger than just the conscious way that you think. And that's the thing that you have to listen to be patient and to be quiet and to be thoughtful. not merely to be swayed by talking points, and especially not to be swayed by your emotions in the moment, but rather to ask yourself in whatever way you possibly can, my God, what is it that you want from me? One of the phenomena that I've noticed the most is that I don't know that many of us know what's right in this moment. We just know what's wrong. I don't know that many of us know that we could articulate, here is step A, B, and C, and this particular world conflict will be resolved. Here's how we're going to get out of it. Can you tell me? I will make you rich if you can. But what I do see is that most of us, rather in our sort of lack of clarity about what we know is right, somehow or another what we're able to fix upon is what we find to be objectionable and wrong. And when we see it, we go at it with both barrels. You know what I mean? Why do we do that, do you think? What is it about that allows us to sort of release so much anger and be so pointed and often quite difficult with each other in moments like that? Well, maybe it's our biology. You know, there are evolutionary biologists who say that it was the last ice age that made us notice what was wrong more than what's right, because it'll keep you alive, you know? It's better to notice the mammoth coming in your direction than it is to say, like, oh, these are pretty flowers. That's their sort of theory that I have absolutely butchered in a nutshell. But I would also say that when we have turmoil about what we think the right thing is to do, feels very, 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 very good to have clarity about when we think someone else is doing wrong. And thus we are able to unleash all of our lack of clarity into a moment of clarity and then go after people like that. The reason I just sort of want to bring you back to these words is I experience people doing that all the time, at least in the culture in which we live. And one of the things that I do is basically, I'm just going to sort of say, like, these, largely what I see are people in a place of sort of fly-by accusations, in which you drop an accusation and then you go away. It's great on Facebook, right? Someone can come onto your page, comment on something horrible, and then disappear. Or say something horrible and then disappear. And the thing that I want to draw your attention to in the prophets in this moment is actually verses 6 and 7. Because this is what I think the antidote is to it. First of all, the prophet admits his ignorance and admits his youth. I would like us to do a little bit more of that. To admit our ignorance and the fact that we don't have all the answers. And he calls out to God and says, I don't know how to speak because I'm too young to speak. I'm not mature enough. I don't understand things. And Hashem says back to him, don't say it, but go where I send you and speak where I command you. If you turn to verse 11, by the way, it says, the word of the Lord came to me and says, what did you see, Jeremiah? He said, this is on page, are you with me? This is on page 1279. I see a branch of an almond tree. The Lord said to me, you have seen right, for I am watchful to bring my word to pass. This is because the word for almond, which is shaked, is related to the word in Hebrew shoked, which means to like always be, like sort of to be hovering. A shakdan is someone who's always there. It's a compliment in Hebrew. Someone who's a shakdan is someone who's like always studying Torah, for example, or always working very hard. Someone who sort of never leaves. In this, what I want to suggest is what the prophet is teaching us is if we are going to go and speak truth to the world as we understand it, one of the most important things we can do is after we've done it, not to leave, but to be part of a project that's fruitful in repairing it. Large swaths of the population, I think, feel like what's needed right now is to sort of call out what's wrong, and especially to be involved in the destruction of what's not working. But where is God to be found in the prophet? God is to be found with the flowering of the almond branch. That is where God is watchful, and that is where the Holy One is present. And so I say to you, if there is a position that you inhabit, a fragment of the broken that you hold, a piece of truth that you think needs to be heard, it is not, by the way, the place of this community to say, no, don't say it here, say it here. But what I will say to you is if you are going to bring your truth into a communal setting, stay. Fight for it. Have humility about it. Admit your ignorance about it. Work with other people about it. Find the flowering of the almond branch about it. Scorched earth is not the policy of fruitfulness, and yet it is what so much of the world is asking from us today. We need to push against the tide that we see out there of basically declaring that people are wholly wrong and trying to erase them off of our intellectual or emotional maps. And especially in this place, in this community. It is not that you should be denied the truthfulness of your passions or the rightness of your feelings. But if you are going to stand up and speak for them, then stay and speak for them. Fight for them. Be humble about them. Be open about them. And be like the prophet, in which you say, I don't know. Please guide me. Shabbat shalom.